Hey, thanks for 10K everybody. Here's all the Pokemon villain reviews I've done this year. You may notice omissions, but that's why I'll be live right here on YouTube Friday the 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern, putting all of these guys and more on a tier list and fielding all questions. That's Friday the 15th of November at 7 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss out. Now please, enjoy.
Team Rocket, where it all began. There's a surprising amount to be said for them. Their goals are simple, their presence is consistent, and their uniforms are well crafted to appear menacing given sprite limits. Solid black, whips, and heavy boots sell Animal's crime boy hard. They don't have an overarching motive beyond crime, but that works for the disconnected array of schemes we run into. A ransacked home, an HQ under an arcade, and a corporate office raid. The scattered projects leave a presence, a busyness to them that's yet to be replicated by other villain teams. Team Rocket gives the impressive sensation that they're always doing something, somewhere. They don't need to seem connected because they aren't. Their only failing is that the Sylph raid and bioexperimentation do feel like build up to a climax that never happened. It was a weird transmedia ecosystem that kept passing the buck on a Mewtwo finale until it was way too late to follow up. And then Giovanni's just running the 8th gym for some reason, and it left me wondering, why was an anticlimax the way we ended our very first game? If you're surprised to hear that Team Rocket are the most interesting part of the show, you either haven't watched enough of the show or you've watched way too much of the show. The most prevalent characters outside of Ash himself, they turn from semi-serious threats who get dunked on in slapstick ways, all the way to an ADD odd throuple of habitual crossdressers and Inspector Gadget knockoffs in about 4 episodes flat, and if I can't respect that, I don't deserve fun. Giant robots aside, these are actually flawed characters. An overconfident prima donna, a sassy doormat, and a know-nothing know-it-all goblin. They're the sort of villains where it's definitely possible to build an episode of the show without them, but why would you? It would be boring. When protagonists are barely motivated fun sponges within the context of an episode, the villains become the only ones who can drive the pace, who can take the weird foibles of the setting and poke them until something blows up. If something new or even interesting is happening in an episode of Pokemon, you can bet money it's because of Jesse, James, and Meowth, that's right, blasting off at the speed of light. Ooh, Team Rocket, we're almost through it. Where the games make them unfocused troublemakers and the anime makes them better protagonists, the Pokemon Adventures manga creates a powerful, organized conspiracy. Biological experiments were a context-free footnote in the games that's been upgraded to become the focal point of their crimes, creating Mewtwo and other terrors as bioweapons. This directly, specifically, informs their actions. By that metric, it is somehow unparalleled in the franchise. There is an issue though. Team Rocket in the games don't have enough proper named characters for a manga. To solve this, Kusaka retcons Koga, Sabrina, and Lieutenant Surge as, well, lieutenants of Team Rocket. This fills out the Rocket cast while trimming the otherwise bloated army of gym leaders, borrowing their imposing authority for villainous purposes and starting some of my most hotly debated playground rumors. Frankly, I find it a little alarming just how much Adventures needs to change the source material to create what it does, but damn does it work. If you haven't read the manga, do it. It's December 1998. Pokemon has been out for just shy of 3 years, and Hidenori Kusaka is already entirely bored with badges. These things do nothing. Get 8 and you're allowed into the big boy club. Final Fantasy was doing that a decade ago. So, Kusaka thought about it. What's the one thing badges actually do? They let you control your Pokemon better. Okay, let's take that further and control an army to invade all of Kanto! This Elite Four wants to purge the world of humanity because their leader, a Pokemon empath with unclear forest origins, sees them as harmful to Pokemon and looks to control legendary Pokemon to do it. Doesn't that sound familiar? The scale of their invasion is unmatched in the franchise. This version of Lance was 11 years ahead of N, and every member is built to highlight and foil our protagonists. From Red and Bruno's Goku syndrome, to Blue and Agatha's history with Oak, to Green and Lorelei being powerful Pokemon Adventures is constantly years ahead of the rest of the franchise in a really uncanny way. It wouldn't surprise me to hear that Game Freak explicitly come to the manga when they can't come up with anything. After Team Rocket was so thoroughly disgraced by a 10-year-old and their leader vanished into the ether, you wouldn't think there'd be much they could do to stay narratively relevant. You'd be right. In Johto, Team Rocket's stated goal is to regain their lost glory, and that really shows. Our villains start out irrelevant in Johto, aspire to be relevant in Johto, and we have already shot ourselves in the foot because they're not relevant in Johto! The most interesting event is letting Lance flex his Dragonite and bust down a wall while you follow. Their final scheme is a knockoff Max Headroom incident hijacking a radio tower that they could have done at any time and makes no progress towards their actual goal. Johto Team Rocket is aimless and clumsy when, unlike Kanto, they're specifically trying not to be that. They're crying for a leader who doesn't care anymore, and it entirely fails to liven up Johto. Given that this is what happens when Game Freak recycle villain teams, it's probably for the best that the Rockets didn't have the staying power they needed to recur in Hoenn. In the early 2000s, environmentalism became mainstream. People started to worry about growing landfills, melting ice caps, holes in the ozone layer, and a lot of media was starting to reflect that. So when Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire came out with Team Magma and Aqua making an ecological argument for higher and lower sea levels, it always struck me as pretty weird. Like it's trying and failing to act unrelated to the greater discussion, framing it as a fantastical thing that could never really happen, right? Now, it isn't Game Freak's job to radicalize the 5-year-olds, but this is a weird stance, and it's the only interesting thing to say about Max and Archie's impact that isn't more obvious elsewhere. They hunt for plot device, they awaken the legendary off-screen, they immediately regret that decision. Petty theft, a wimpy museum occupation, and a failed volcano scheme all lack a connecting through line, just like Team Rocket did, but grand designs like these require connecting logic or they look unplanned and desperate. You'd think needing to mix and match villain motivation puts a limit on things. Cipher is a group from Pokémon Colosseum and XD, GameCube titles by Genius Sonority that started something of a golden age for Pokémon spin-offs. I'll take Rumble Blast over Cafe Remix any day. They're entirely unremarkable as villains go. They have shadow Pokemon, they have manpower, they want to take over the world with it. Now, what makes Cipher stand out is the way they set a trend and set the bar for spin-offs, making villain commanders into absolute madmen. Later games would tone the role down to colorfully smug hot people, but just look at these lunatics. Every one of these characters is played to the hilt, then the pommel, then your elbow. Need I mention Mirror B? Being the sole point of focus within their own set pieces helps them to shine as boss battles, and the unparalleled lunacy is all the character they need to hold your interest in the rich and gritty world of Ore, with no need for the artifice of badges or leagues. The fact that Game Freak still can't find this kind of focus for their games and Genius Sonority gets it first try is unsurprising, but sobering. Stealing someone's Pokemon has always been the go-to threat. Everybody's supposedly doing it, but we've only ever seen it in-game twice. Pico, Hughes Purloin, and that's it. Team Snag 'em is the only time the threat was relevant. There's an anti-Pokeball DRM machine owned exclusively by this motorcycle gang. They've been contracted to steal high-value Pokemon for Cipher, like CDOT and Teddy Ursa. It writes itself. Team Snag 'em isn't much more than an origin story for the main character Wes, and some uncomplicated bad guys to blow up. They're just what Pokemon has always needed. Some jobbers to be on the nasty end of a bomb. To open with the idea that what these characters are doing is important, that you should pay attention to them. If I wanted to feel like I'm 7 again, I'd get blind, drunk, play Kirby, and drown myself in the tub. What I come to an RPG for is a story, and Team Snag 'em enables that just fine. Did you know that Genius Sonority's president and Pokemon Colosseum director Manabu Yamana came from a leading position on the 90s Dragon Quest games? Yeah, he worked for Chunsoft and Enix. Why is that relevant? Oh, I don't know. Dusknoir is Colosseum's leader of Cipher in all the ways that matter, but there's very little substance to him. His word count is closer to this script than most conversations, he's distant and untouchable until he decides otherwise, and to top it off, he looks like Dark Riku freebased the Sephora catalog and jacked himself blind. But I do value Dusknoir as a villain because despite his unhinged visuals, the game is still unmistakably Pokemon. Outside takes on the franchise that separate themselves from its baby's first urban fantasy origins have always been among its highlights. From the Final Fantasy airship in the new anime to the Tree of Life in Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, Pokemon has always been an unbelievably versatile setting that doesn't get used that way outside of spin-offs. I wonder what Genius Sonority's up to now. Oh, that's depressing. Hashtag free Genius Sonority. Shadow Pokemon, so evil, so nasty. Haha, edgy. Mechanically, they act as a major wrench to shake up encounters, adding an additional degree of success. It tests your damage measuring capture skills in the middle of an active double battle. It provides an eclectic mix of weird Pokemon early in the game, and gives the old surf and earthquake spam tactic an actual downside. It's a really fun spin on the core mechanics of the game that does away with a lot of its annoyances like random encounters while combining existing mechanics for very approachable depth and actual decision making. Shadow Pokemon are the shorthand for why Cipher is a major problem. Genius Sonority were skilled game designers who saw that singles are restrictive, saw that badges are boring, saw that the formula needs more variable successes, and weren't afraid to fix what's broken with an on-brand, elegant solution, and TPC dissolved them to make mobile garbage for 18 years. So again, hashtag free Genius Sonority. There is a lot to learn from these games. It's always fun to remember that Pokemon spin-offs were so far ahead of the main lines. Pokemon Ranger realized that a loosely regulated criminal gang branding themselves like a sports team is an absurd concept that desperately needs camp. Enter the Go Rock Squad, headed by the Go Rock Quads and their boss, Go Erdor. They exist in specific opposition to the Pokemon Rangers because Gordor was jealous of the Rangers founder, Professor Hastings, which is as good a reason as any to start the National Hooligan Institution. Their recruitment crew of cocky hipsters and the worst kind of entitled boomer without any specific plans beyond control Pokemon for fun and profit. Once they're set as the main threat, every mission boils down to, hey, they showed up someplace new, go there and kick them in the goofy. Which I can't be too mad about. They draw us to interesting places that they have reasons to be, but the and then nature of the plot means I struggle to remember more than the surface level charm. The closest thing to a villain in Rescue Team is Gengar, the spiteful leader of Team Meanies. He is just a bully, but he's a petty bully. After he overhears your little isekai secret and what it implies about your role in breaking the world's balance, he gives the Pokemon games their very first taste of narrative uncertainty. The Fugitive arc. We know it, we love it, none of us were ready for it. What makes this procedural dungeon gauntlet into a real childhood ender is the pronounced tonal break. The town's reaction is genuinely destabilizing for such a sugar-sweet setting. You'd expect it to pull at least some punches, but Lombre disagrees and takes a wild swing at these kids. Holy! Narration and bleak background art are used exceptionally well to abridge the long and harrowing journey without undercutting it. These portraits put so much scale on that map screen. Bring this stuff back. It's bold to take these games to this place for the first time, let alone use it to sell the scale of the world, but my god does it pay off. Where Gengar sort of fits as a villain, the real threat of Rescue Team comes from rising ecological catastrophes. They make travel difficult, strand people in mystery dungeons, and not much else. Most of our time is spent solving lower stakes problems. Supposedly, these disasters are because of a disturbance in the world's balance, but functionally, they're disconnected natural phenomena that don't have any long-term impact on us. Our characters initially suspect in this disturbance, which did become of something, but no, it's just a fat honkin' space rock solved by jumping on Rayquaza's head and turning it upwards. So the Fugitive arc doesn't actually move much forward, and yes, that did hurt to say. The journey to stop the natural disasters leads us to plenty of cool places, so it's not slacking per se, and they certainly feel like enough of a threat when the Fugitive arc has us walking right through them, but the game as a whole has a weak through line between events. It's one of the standout ways the Rescue Team feels like an experiment, like it's only testing the waters compared to what would come after. Team Galactic was a step up for Pokemon, jumping from Crimes, Crimes 2, and Big Weather straight to recreate the universe and everything within. It's an increase in stakes and scope that mainline villains have tried to uphold since. That's a fine move forward for the series. You don't set off a Richter 7 bomb without immediately saying you mean business. Team Galactic, like any good villain, is the most interesting thing happening in Sinnoh, which means the other conservatively 60% of the game, your rival, the badges, your Pokédex, serve the narrative pacing like an ad break. Of course Cyrus can't be the finale. You need to go to the League for what is by now the 7th f***ing time. This pattern of pretending that the League matters for shit after these world-ending set pieces is an absurd problem to have. If they don't want to write a story about a high-concept villain, they can just not. Every time we are rushed out of the villain's finale, it reads like Game Freak are embarrassed by an earnest attempt at drama. It is endlessly frustrating to see new, interesting ideas only included under protest. Team Dim Sun, in Japanese, Yummy Yummy Dan, literally dark gang. A while back I said that most spin-offs toned down Cipher's lunacy to smug hot people. This is what I meant, because that's what their higher-ups boil down to, smug, color-coded teenagers with the most in-your-face characterization this side of Kamen Rider. What's impressive in Team Dim Sun is the slow boil. The plot starts spotting their machine's effects, finding a random fall guy, then a small-scale experiment with some badge-carrying grunts. It takes patience to play out the lengths of investigation needed to track Team Dim Sun down from a base of nothing, and to create circumstantial reasons for our character to be the one on their heels. It's a meticulous, meal well made kind of plot. They also have a freight carrier and a volcano, an undersea oil base, they raid ancient ice castles, desert temples, and your HQ. FBI, open up! Almia's got a lot to offer, and Team Dim Sun are taking you along for the ride. They single-handedly drive a fantastic pace for Pokemon Ranger 2, even if some of these lines have aged like sewer wine. Mystery Dungeon 2 is the most patient game I've ever played. It creates a natural transition from inconsequential fetch quests to apocalyptic fetch quests. That journey starts on the beach, where Team Skull, two stock rocket gruntmons, steal a fancy rock, and your partner folds like a tissue, framing both of you as the lowest of underdogs. Team Skull are reprehensible, puddle-shallow bullies. They want money, they want treasure, and the things they do for it are very petty, but they're also personal. They want to get in the guildmaster's good graces, they sabotage your mission and get the perfect apples themselves, leaving you punished for failing to resolve the shortage they caused. They are stomping on faces for a foot up, and you're just unlucky to be underfoot. Nothing they do is ambitious or far-reaching, but the story is better for it. It's not force, but pressure that creates a diamond. Under the pomp and circumstance of world domination and destruction, it's the personal stakes that let us relate to these characters and give us a reason to care about the end of their world. Like Rescue Team before it, Explorers of Time, Darkness in the Sky don't focus on a villain, but instead an apocalypse. Where Rescue Team's natural disasters suffer for being vague and abstract, the planet's paralysis is front and center. While the truth of the cause is first hidden behind myth and time travel, the drip feed of information and the reverence around what we do know weaves a genuine mystery from a narrative largely given out by Dusknoir. It's scary stuff, and when we do travel to the future, we see for ourselves everything we've been deceived into enabling. Briefly showing the worst case scenario is a common way to back up stakes, but I've seen few stories, gaming or otherwise, that linger on it quite like this, taking what's normally a few panning shots and
oh, it's gonna be wild,
and making a lengthy arc to let the new direction really sink in before we escape. This is what the story is about now, and we will not be going back. Like it or not, Pokemon is a wildly versatile fantasy series, and the price of that freedom is the expectation to use it. Interior, Explorers Guild, night. It's storming. Your partner points out it's just like when you appeared. You still don't know why you're here. Your partner can't sleep, but then neither can you. You get to talking. Your transformation, your visions, they must be connected somehow. Before you met your partner, you were definitely a good person. You have to have been. Your visions saved a life. Surely that's why you're here. Nobody you know or have ever heard of would steal time gears, but then you don't know why you're here. On this night, like when you appeared, a cutaway presents a shadowed figure tearing through the underbrush. You don't know this Pokemon. This theft is poised to ruin many lives, but they are acting with specific purpose. You don't know why that storm brought you here. In storytelling, parallel and perpendicular are matters of perspective.
Subtle!
Dusknoir is going to be a two-parter. He's an explorer of prodigious, sudden reputation, met by your partner with confusion at how such a colossal personality could escape their notice. Dusknoir is inscrutable, with stoic portraits and universal acclaim that prime him for suspicion. Where mainline games use Pokemon team comps for surface-level aesthetics with little to no symbolism, Cyrus Crobat! Explorers chooses to toy with the visual element, taking great pains to prove that despite his uncanny introduction and imposing red eye, he is a good-hearted Pokemon. When he reveals his origin as a time traveler, that gives him more than enough authority to dictate the state of things to the guild, and he's a great guy. He saved our lives, why wouldn't we take him at his word? All of this to say, when he takes Grovile's capture into his own hands, we understand he's capable of it and why he would want to, but as we count down the days, it all seems a little too easy, doesn't it? I'm reviewing a new Pokemon villain every week. Like and subscribe for part 2. Hey, remember Pokemon Insurgents? The fan game that clickbaited you about a Doomsday Cult storyline? Yeah, that wasn't new. When Mystery Dungeon 2 brings us to the future, we see the great Dusknoir's nature revealed. The Psychopump Pokemon drags you into hell. Dusknoir is brutal. His eyes are everywhere, his stockade matches cities, and he has the trust of all your greatest friends. He is the brains, the enforcer behind Primal Dialga's will. A will that seems ill-defined. Primal Dialga is just that. Primal, unthinking. I don't believe Dusknoir is taking specific orders from a wild animal. Dusknoir's cult looks to bring about the end because if the world they hail from never comes to be, then neither will they. They will fight tooth and claw and execute anyone if it will see to their own miserable survival. The blurry boundary between self-interest and fanaticism underlines a deep, selfish fear. God, I love me some good subtext. Team Rocket steals Pokemon this, Team Galactic steals Pokemon that. For all the lip service Poke theft gets, it's rarely been central without the circumstances. Thus are born the Pokemon poachers, pinchers, and they dodge every problem with the main series. They're not sharing any spotlight, we see them doing their villain stuff, their visual design borrows real-world implications, they have more than 2 set pieces to their name, and their leaders are actually characterized beyond bad dudes. Where Almia mostly confronts Team Dim Sun for experimenting or trafficking, the pinchers have a more direct agenda that adapts to your meddling, but the villainy is just illegal business done for money. That neutral group motive leaves room for Red and Blue Eyes to flesh out how the demands of their job aren't super good for them personally. They react like people to their larger-than-life roles, tying right in with the focus on community over self-importance in the face of Oblivia's magical,
cyclical history. Stay true to each other out there, okay? The Society are a group of retired thieves and the true threat of Pokemon Ranger Guardian signs. Entirely separate from the goofier crew dealt with prior. What, you think Game Freak came up with their new villain dynamic by themselves? You're crazy. A doctor, a magician, a lumberjack, and a master of disguise with absurd Japanese names, all deeply displeased by the ravages of age and seeking to uncover the golden armor to find eternal youth and rule forever. The Pinchers were waking the legendary birds on their behalf to bring out the Sky Fortress they'll rule from, a fortress they use to blast Dolce Island off the map. Their presence is a bit sudden, but well accounted for by the plot. They hide behind the Pinchers because they lack manpower, and they pull a Laputa because they need to be taken seriously by Oblivia and us. Pulling this man behind the man villain reveal without shooting yourself in the foot is tricky, but this is a solid example that's easy to learn from. The Society's reveal is a much needed shakeup after the Pinchers were at their interest. Still surprised Game Freak were smart enough to adopt this formula. Team Plasma, finally a Game Freak villain with substance. This is the first and to date only time that the series has questioned its core concept of owning Pokemon. Where other games before and after flat out refuse to acknowledge a single consequence of their status quo, Team Plasma is at least a token argument that this world might have actual problems. With that one spark of conflict in place, Game Freak's trademarked incessant affirmations that you and your Pokemon are friends, normally a blind mantra, repeated by the world as if to stop you from asking questions, begin to carry dramatic weight as counter-arguments. Team Plasma's incompatible worldview puts stakes behind upholding that ideal. They don't just disagree, they find a moral failure in not asking these questions. The way we do things did not arrive ex nihilo in its final state. The world has flaws we're too acclimatized to notice. Beautiful possibilities, directly opposing tradition and deserving attention. I am still talking about Pokemon, right? Natural Harmonia Gropius. We almost had it. So good. N is a curious thing. His origins are purposefully mysterious, his nature is tastefully questionable, and academically, he's dripped out of his mind. Puzzles and geometric accessories over the wild, flared ponytail. As though beneath these restraining outer layers, he is still something untamed and unknowable. N is the groomed, charismatic king of Team Plasma. His manner of speaking is distant, preternaturally calm, and wrapped up in his own mind. He seeks to separate Pokemon and humans that Pokemon might become perfect beings, but he never verbally places himself in either category. His goals and ambitions are far more compelling than Gethys, with a sympathetic love for his Pokemon friends, creating an irreconcilable clash of well-meaning individuals. This is near perfect setup. There should be no way to go wrong with N in the climax. Now let's have his dad yell at him and then completely fail to stand up for these ideals he was ready to kill people over 5 seconds ago. God! Gethys is a power-hungry nut job, and yep, that's it. He's a cult leader, right down to his over-designed robes. The feats Team Plasma achieves under him are genuinely impressive and evocative imagery surrounding this temple to Pokemon battling with his own would-be throne. Only problem, N is right there, and for much of the game, Gethys plays a secondary role. N has independent screen time and a personal relationship. Gethys is a mouthpiece for Team Plasma's credo. When N is at his peak and earning the spotlight, Gethys simply appears in the room and N shuts down. It's a subtle character detail that I can appreciate and having. What I don't appreciate is that detail being used to stop that momentum. Gethys is unexceptional. A factory default villain only stand out among his peers by being in N's shadow. Game Freak's sidelining N implies they didn't realize how unique he was. This mistreatment of their best ideas makes these moments we treasure appear accidental and meaningless. Oh boy, reusing a villain team in a second story. Where have we seen that before? Nah, they deserve a bit more credit than that. Team Neoplasma, unofficial name, are meaningfully different from their predecessors. Gone are the Knights Templar robes, replaced by black and gray form-fitting combat vests. This is a Team Plasma that convincingly looks and acts like a radicalized breakaway faction. No more pretense of animal rights activism, only domination. They're sleek, they're intimidating, they're fresh out of any nondescript 90s cartoon. This new rendition is reasonably effective. Hugh is nominally affected by their Poke theft. Pellucid City proves they mean business a little late. Gethys can play the cackling bastard with the spotlight all to himself. Congratulations! It's Sonic Adventure 2 with less context. The most interesting things about original Team Plasma were the religious tones, the self-assured righteousness, the standards that put them above acting like this. Take those away and we have Cobra Command at home. Like, it'll do, but why should I commend a step down? Okay, bear with me. These guys are the peak of nice rivals, a character role often derided by the nostalgia crowd for not being blue in a wig, but today is the day I agree with the Gen 1ers. To hell with these twerps! I can fully describe them all in one sentence apiece. Trevor is a know-it-all tutorial goblin, Tierno has a bit that'd be lame in a route trainer, Serena and Caleb are... And Shauna, lacks a clear goal. Direct Bulbapedia quote, by the way, even they couldn't come up with a reason for her to be here. But I'd like to single Shauna out here. Her contribution to the plot is to drag you by the ear into a ghost house and then complain that the story told within is terrible. We have a character who observes that a scene is pointless and uninteresting, and nobody on staff saw that scene as a problem worth removing. Their impact on the story is non-existent, so all that remains of them are these perfect crystallizations of Game Freak's storytelling pain points. Shallow characters, arbitrary scenes, presupposition of player investment, and a complete disregard for your time. Next week is Lysandre, so subscribe, we're gonna have some fun. I had so many very pretentious drafts of this script, but I can't put it any better than this. Lysandre is a Nazi. Oh god. Game Freak clearly wanted Lysandre to be a subtle and noble villain just like N, but instead of making him subtle and noble, Game Freak sent every character out of their way to state how they respect his noble motives, while he's loading God into a nuclear railgun to destroy Paris Syndrome the setting. He needs to appear subtle, so other characters must fail to notice that he's a transparent lunatic. He needs to appear morally complex, but his actions boil down to kill everyone, so of course, your rival becomes a genocide apologist about it. Hey, Game Freak, what the fuck? I won't pretend to know what kind of executive hell meddling can produce this, but there is a profound, disturbing disconnect between the Lysandre in Toshinobu Matsumiya's mind, who the characters react to, and the Lysandre in-game. To address supremacism and the pretense of nobility, to preach about compromise with dictators when that was never an option, it's more than incompetence, it's just irresponsible. Yeah, I'm never letting Game Freak or Game Informer live this down. A ragged, immortal king, wandering the earth, atoning for past sins, that is some FromSoft energy, and I'm here for it. What are we gonna do with this guy? He's gonna vague post to himself in a field, get jailed, and then fight you for no reason. Wonderful use of the concept. His team tries to come off decrepit and mysterious, but then he drops a tortoise in a Fu Manchu, and I feel like I'm getting punked. Oh, Floet's back. Why? Good question. Why does Sycamore know this? Also good. Why should I care? There's the butter. That's every scene he has in 30 seconds. He has the key to the ancient weapon, and that's it. He might as well be a lockbox, a tomb underneath Geosenge. If AZ won't do anything in the present, then the backstory's a moot point. Congratulations, plot wouldn't change if he were dead. At least, the old end design motifs got used somewhere? I'm scraping here. Just like Lysandre, just like the haunted house, just like so much in Game Freak's Pokemon, your investment is assumed and taken for granted. Nobody considers why we should care about this depressed idiot, we're just expected to. Gen 6, man. Hey, it's your boy! Who doesn't love these guys at least a little? Team Skull is where Game Freak started a new direction with the villain teams, turning them into ineffectual goobers with no real ambition. And after Team Flare, I'll say that was probably a good decision. Team Skull are a bunch of Snapchat rapper troublemakers and graffiti artists who live in a slum, have no support network, resorting to theft and vandalism because they, let me check my notes, failed to live up to the narrow expectations of the Island Challenge. Whoops. They're comic relief, but the only bit on offer is, haha, they're ineffectual, which we can do better than that. I don't want to see I locked myself out of the gate dopey. I want to see hang gliding through a window, Mantine surfboard cavalry stupid. Plot-wise, Guzma's just hanging around while the climax happens, and after that they all get jobs, okay? They could have been the ones pushing Alola to modernize with the League, or they could have done anything to rally against the Island Challenge's standards, but nope. The anarcho-communist punks go conformist, happy ending! I love them dearly, but as they are, they really don't have anything to add to this game. Where Team Skull marked a conscious choice by Game Freak to turn the teams into gag fodder, the Aether Foundation is a shot at a grounded villain. Time to self-awareness? 20 years. Ugh. Luzamine is a shining, immaculate narcissist. Obsessed with her image as a loving caretaker, she runs the Aether Foundation as a conservation effort come vanity project, hosting a vault of frozen Pokemon for her to love forever. Her drive to find the Ultra Beasts and give them a love she speaks of like a divinely mandated boon reads fresh out of cosmic horror. It's haunting to watch her degrade her family in favor of Ultra Space's alien beauty, a beauty we see as she subsumes herself in Nihilego for Pokemon's most striking and deservedly extravagant character design. She becomes the goddess she believes she is in her own perfect bubble. My only critique, and it is a big one, is that our dough-faced idiot has the least reason of anyone to care about this. I'd rather play as the actual protagonist Gladion and fight the giant space octopus instead of her stupid Clefable. Gen 7 pushed the envelope on what characterization Pokemon can pull off, and did an alright job turning that into conflict. What's a good way to build off of that? Game Freak's answer is f***ing aliens that show up at random, exposition dump like you're not meant to hear it, and we don't react to extra-dimensional sapient life because, ooh, shiny rocks and malasada. Nothing existentially disruptive to see back there, it's fine. Necrozma stole the light from their home dimension after, oh god, that backstory's a mess, and plunging their alt dimension Crystal Punk Metropolis into Eternal Night. Fantastic. Amazing setup. This happens in the background. It puts Lily's anxieties under scope, it breaks Luzamine's sociopathy with an act of real charity. For what? For a last-minute sharp right into a different plot that would rock if they treated the aliens recapturing their god like the killer plot hook they are, instead of a quirky footnote at the cat lady's seastead. Game Freak is and always has been pathologically unable to focus on the interesting parts of their stories. For this reason, I'm spiking their water supply with Ritalin as we speak. What's this? All the villains are together to celebrate Pride. Video done. I'm reviewing a new Pokemon oh, what? You wanted something more than that? You want me to say something substantial about Team Rainbow freaking Rocket? Crossover, nostalgia bait, show don't tell violations. What else is there to say? It's a micro Pokemon World Tournament with a flavor tweak and technobabble masquerading as connective tissue to enable shallow fan service, which I'll go on the record and say, I like that. I also like baby animals, sugar, and oxygen. I'm not a Hellraiser demon, but these reasons aren't interesting. Any faults I would ascribe to this are invalidated by transparently absurd post-game hand-waving. It's not competing for space or needing to carry me through the plot. It clearly wants to be a thin excuse for crossover battles. It is that, and doesn't care to try any further. Rainbow Rocket is a puff piece at the end of a game that already lacked focus. It's cotton candy that melts the second you taste it. I give it Chris Chen's Dimensional Merge out of 10 because advertising a Pokemon Go patch at the end was so necessary. This is Colress, and Game Freak, what was the goal here? Colress appears in Black and White 2 and does very little. He's an amoral scientist who don't give no heck about his employer so long as he can draw the power out of Pokemon. A rare driving force shared only by every trainer ever. During his introduction, he never did anything that couldn't be hand-waved by a Team Plasma R&D group, but being entirely pointless is no reason not to be a recurring character. He gets mentioned in Kalos and reappears in Alola to pull a bunch of gizmos out of his butt when we already had 2 tech geniuses on hand for episode RR. So my question is, why did we bother? He never brought anything to the table. He could be cut from the series with 3 edits. He's only here because somebody on staff got attached and shoehorned their lab coat best boy in where he's not necessary. Don't at me, Pippa. I could say a lot of the same about Charon in the Kalos postgame. I don't know why Game Freak is like this, but they'd have you think contributing nothing is a premium feature. Team Yell are a bunch of punk rockers out to support Marnie, their hometown representative in the Galar Pokemon League, and they are owed an apology. This is an inspired design, and I don't care what anyone else has to say about it. Galar is based on the UK, and much of the league there borrows from the aesthetics of football pitches and jerseys. Soccer! Sit down. So turning one competitor's supporters into obnoxious football hooligans, screaming at the top of their lungs in the audience, and turning into a public nuisance, it's a perfect fit to highlight that story. Team Yell has grounding and narrative purpose unlike anything Game Freak has ever done. They're not here to cause actual problems, they're here to bolster Marnie's character above the Ash Ketchum shonen clone slop. Through their presence and aesthetics, they do, and I'm glad that they don't overstay their welcome. Galar made me care about the Pokemon League for the first time in ages because of how side characters show that it matters to them. They stake pride and town identity on the success of one proxy, and if that doesn't capture everything about pro sports, what does? Okay, Macrocosmos is just Shinra, right? I'm not crazy. An energy conglomerate running low on the dangerous fuel that enables the life of luxury for its people looking for an endless source to bring prosperity forever, damn the consequences. That's Shinra. Despite parallels to FF7's thematic, plot-central juggernaut, I'm confident calling these guys the most widely disliked and irrelevant Pokemon villain. Where Shinra kicks off the entire plot and carries the themes of power, trauma, and Gaia's vengeance up to the final act, Macrocosmos appears for maybe half an hour to interrupt the tournament's climax because you've gotta have a god fight. Their plan wouldn't matter at all if Chairman Rose, organizer of a nationwide sports festival, were capable of rescheduling. Even Pokemon fans recognize this is dumb, and that's saying a lot when people will stand Lysandre and Xerosic, but you can fix the logic of this with one line about, whoa, this is a once-in-a-lifetime alignment, and I don't know if that makes this better or worse. Pokemon's always been fine for concepts. Ideas are cheap, execution is everything, and this slideshow certainly feels like an execution. Legends Arceus takes a lot of cues from the DS era spin-offs. Chief among them is making the player part of an organization. It's a killer plot device. It provides a cast of members with a reason to stick by you, a source of intel to continue a meandering plot, and the means to back up a high-concept goal. But it does require a leader named Kamado, who sucks. Despite being allegedly competent, everything he does is paranoid anti-Pokemon nonsense that fails to align with the world around him or anyone else in Jubilive. Notably, this hatred does not stop him from having his own party. A character with real trauma around Pokemon and an aversion to being a trainer, judo throwing their way through Sinnoh, great angle. But that requires an even-handed portrayal of the monsters that cannot gel with the "you're just marketable pushy quitters" vibe that TPC thinks fully captures the brand. So instead, Kamado must double down on being a hypocritical do-nothing loon who nobody we've met in Jubilife would agree with, but they just enable him because if they don't, then how can we completely miss the point of the fugitive arc? I'm gonna cry. What do you believe the origin of all things would look like? What divine cradle of time and space could be corporeal enough for man to touch and powerful enough to bring its progeny to heal? What majesty would surround such a relic? Wonder no more, because Game Freak's answer to that question is here. It's 3 p.m. on Friday, I don't care. Ladies and genitals, this is Origin Ore, plot critical object, alleged center of the universe, and proof that Legends shipped while waiting on an art pass to make good on Irida's demented oversell. Thanks for the color commentary, Mrs. Pool Floaties, but we have our own eyes and can make our own judgments. Awe and wonder are not commanded out of an audience. They are earned when they are wrenched from our chest, leaving a hole to be filled by equal fear and passion. Usually Game Freak is just incompetent. They have big ideas, but none of the experience or resources or understanding of the medium to make them work. Not this time. Whoever did this doesn't want to be here, and that's a tragedy. Or Crunch, that's also probably happening. Ah, Volo, harbinger of Pogface thumbnails. This dude was certainly an event. Look, I love that Volo happened. I love that Game Freak is in touch with how the player base feels about anything. I love the asymmetry in battle. I love the cinematic angle. I love that they're trying to make the mythology and gods of this world more active. But Volo is not a good antagonist. He takes credit for the Rift conflict, which changes nothing about it. His entire deal comes from one monologue and an evil laugh. He gives up easily, and mark my words, we're never seeing him again. Gotcha doesn't count. This is how Game Freak gets you. They fill 98% of a game and 30 years of a franchise with dead air, so when they take 2 steps towards a baseline that few games dip below, everyone loses their minds. It took us 24 years to get a 2-stage boss fight. We are not eating good. We've never left McDonald's. Legends Arceus is a step forward, but Pokemon's narrative and game design is so neolithically outdated that when it forges a chalcolithic copper knife, we flip and set it up against Starship Elden Ring at the Game Awards. This is nonsense. Not a villain, but an excuse to talk about narrative technique in Pokemon? You'd think I had a motive to this series. Nemona is another in the pantheon of nice rivals that Gen 1er weirdos want to put under a bus and shoot for reasons I cannot fathom, because that leaves only 2 2/2 unmurdered. She's an unstable battle freak, so she rarely talks about anything but battle, the same as every other rival, gym leader, and living human. She goes as far as stalking you and still can't quite differentiate herself. That said, she does illustrate the problems of her archetype very well and shows that they run deep. Nemona refuses to cast any amount of doubt on the player's abilities, and it's not just her. It's the Elite Four, the Champion, the Professor. Nobody in this game has anything less than absolute confidence in your ability to sweep them into the pavement, and they're happy about it. All of the mainline games are bad for this, but Gen 9 takes it to surreal heights. These dudes are out here glazing 10-year-olds as if that pays the rent. Leave me alone, I am a minor. Okay, if you throw a monster truck rally in a private school, you are not a footnote or villain team. You're the underdog protagonist in a movie that aired exclusively on Disney XD with a budget of misplaced drug money, so why is that not on screen? Team Star has so much more happening in their backstory than actually in the game. This insane clown posse, the terrors of Uva Academy, are relegated to vegging out in communes because characters with agency are hard. There's an interesting story to these guys, but their time has passed. They're tapped out from the second the game starts, and all that's left is to exposition dump about the glory days. We can flash back to their chit-chats, we can sympathize with the vaguest case of bullying in fiction, we can reenact on Ohana with none of the tragedy and a Marcus-sodomized Barbie doll Nepo baby. But none of that matters, because they held a monster truck rally in a fucking private school. Nothing is going to top that. Game Freak's priorities are Jupiter Peanut Transfer Seats insane, and we're wasting Supernova Tier bangers on GM Flatgrass. Why not? Turo is the canon one, I'm sorry, but it's true. AI clones coming from bootleg Iron Man, that tracks. Coming from a supermodel in a loincloth 2-piece, seems mismatched. His arc with Arven is dying for breathing room. The game's events are in random order, that's how it's gonna feel, but goddamn, they swung for the fences and I gotta respect it. The mystery plot, however short-lived, keeps the suspense by presenting something bold and obvious. Of course he's a robot, nobody missed that, but we get to sit in the tension because we don't know what that entails yet or why it happened at all. He gets points for presentation alone, dropping Pokeballs from a skyscraper Scraper, the new type language of Paradox Pokemon, Master Balls, not having to segue into the badge quest, Homestuck typing quirks, thank you, Toby. It's isolated to Area 0, but it's unprecedented visual language and pacing for the series, a new bar that we should expect future generations to surpass. This is what can happen when the Pokemon formula is taken not as a blueprint, but as a foundation, and it's about damn time we found that attitude. Props, Game Freak! That felt so good to say. Pokemon's route design has always been pretty boring. Route 113, South Province Area 4, what is this, the US highway grid? But then we have Area 0, Xenoblade at home, and next to that, Mana from Heaven. At long last, Area 0 is a place where, yeah, Pokemon would probably exist. Instead of perfectly ordinary countryside with a random hippo population, it's full of impossible geography hidden by oceans of fog and set over caves of giant crystal spires. This is a world meant to evoke the wonder and explorative spirit that Pokemon often limits to lip service only. It's the opposite of Sword and Shield. There, a tidy tournament arc is derailed by shoehorned genre obligations. Here, an unfocused disaster, and it is a disaster, don't misconstrue, wraps up its garbage and finally makes good on a promise from 26 years ago. A world of dreams and adventures with Pokemon, a personal journey, an array of friends in unpredictable wilderness, out of their depth with only their Pokemon partners and each other to rely on. That is what makes a Pokemon game, and we should all be glad to have it. Pokémon Horizons, wake up and smell the ashes. No ashes? Well, isn't that a welcome surprise? The explorers are the villains of the new series, pursuing our protagonist with a single-minded focus on her little MacGuffin. Now, if you swap the pendant out for the cash cow rat, you wouldn't think much of this has changed, but they're played seriously, they incite the plot beautifully, and best of all, if an episode doesn't call for them, they don't show up. Rather than wear out their mystique, the show is content and rather skilled, drawing conflict from a larger main cast, their relationships, little slices of fantasy life, and mysteries of sky-shattering scale that rarely go an episode without progress. Streaming serialization does this show very right. Horizons is the franchise coming into its own in a very real way. There is so much more to love in the world of Pokemon than badges and bike paths if we lock in 100% on coming of age and unbridled excitement for the possibilities of a world where anything can happen. God, I'm a sucker for stupid fantasy airships. It's the first step to something better, and that's scary, but I swear it's the most freeing thing in the world to look beyond nostalgic comfort and vow to never look back. The second step is getting on Canadian Netflix. Subscribe, I'm doing a compilation and live stream of all of these soon. Bye!